Hello, everyone. Welcome to our instructor presentations, whether you're here in person or online via Zoom. I'd like to welcome everyone here and a happy start to your workshop week. Tonight we've got 5 instructors presenting, and yeah, I hope it's going to be absolutely fantastic. You know, I kind of wish there were some more geese around because they would make really good wingmen for this presentation. And I'm going to use that segue into our first presentation for tonight. Introducing Talya Kantro is our fine metals assistant, Megan Brooks. So welcome.
Hello, I am introducing Talya Kantro, and she is the Fine Metals Fellow here at Peters Valley. She went to SUNY New Paltz for undergrad and received her MFA in jewelry from Rhode Island School of Design. She was a resident at Pocosin and has taught at Snow Farm. Talya can identify any bird and is a boggle champion. She is the mother of 1,400 beetles named Beethoven, and she has seen a bear, cicada, baby deer, snail, red ebb, full-grown newt, hawk, downy woodpecker, eastern kingbird, wood ducks, baby wood ducks, possum, raccoon, porcupine, shad, and a cane cricket within the last 2 days. So, introducing Talya.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks. All right. Hi, everyone. As introduced, I'm Talya Kantro. I'm excited to be here talking to you all tonight. I'm the fellow here. I work here. This is my 3rd year at Peters Valley, non-consecutively. So I'm excited to talk to you all about my work tonight. Can people hear me? Yeah. I love it. All right. Okay, so I started here at Peters Valley right after my undergraduate degree in 2017. So this is a picture of Thunder Mountain back then, used to be green, and a Luna moth that I found up there. So there'll be lots of animal slides in my presentation as foreshadowed by Megan. And I just include this in here because I think Peters Valley is a really important part of my development as an artist. So I always like to pay tribute to it. And of course, I'm still here, so I'm not paying tribute. I am paying tribute. Anyway, so I did a lot of enameling at SUNY New Paltz for undergrad. My thesis was these enameled fish. They're brooches. They're about yay big, made out of vitreous enamel and fine silver and some copper. I have always had a phobia of deep waters, the ocean, scary fish with teeth, and I was really interested in them, and I was drawn to them while still kind of being repulsed by them. So I was interested in taking a technique like enamel, like cloisonné, champleve, traditionally very beautiful techniques, really delicate, and kind of transforming them into these fish that I've always had a really irrational aversion to. So I was just looking to kind of mix the repulsive with the beautiful. So I made this series of fish for my undergraduate thesis. Here's a gulper eel and an anglerfish, the classic guy. So they're all brooches, mostly silver. Yeah, here's a viperfish. So most of my work is in enamel, the work that I currently do, and I consider myself an enamelist. So this is cloisonné, all of these thin little silver lines, and then the thicker lines, color in copper and silver, are champleve. So that's what I was doing at SUNY New Paltz for my undergrad. Then after New Paltz, this is still in New Paltz, but here's a red-bellied snake that I found. You can pick them up, no problem. And I, New Paltz, not that I haven't always been into nature and being in the outdoors, but New Paltz, I'm from Long Island originally, was the first place that I was really able to get out there and experience what I consider to be kind of true wilderness in the Catskills. So that was really important for me in my development. Sorry? That one's Mohonk. Yeah, that is Montague Crag in Mohonk. Very nice. About an hour and a half from here. If anybody would like directions, it's worth it. So I got to Peters Valley and I continued the same kind of work that I was doing. I was playing with things a little bit differently, getting more into like, I consider it the sublime, a little bit less conceptual and more formal, which has always been hard for me to do. So still working with enamel, some hatchet fish. But I was free to kind of play around in the studio here, make things that I wasn't able to in a very confined academic setting. So working with a lot of enamel, a lot of fish. This is the fish pin head that I made for my fellow when I was the assistant here, Lucy Jockle. So we did a trade for that. But yeah, I really developed a lot of my cloisonne skills here, and I still make a lot of fish. I have an homage to the crew that I was with when I was an assistant here in 2017. And the assistants here just heard the spiel 2 weeks ago, but here is Hilltop House, how it used to look. Somebody lives in this room now, but it used to be our little hangout room. And then after my time here as an assistant, I went to Israel to work as a bench jeweler in Tel Aviv. So I was there for about 6 months or so. Here's the building and here's our little studio. I was developing a line of alternative engagement rings for people. So they hired me on as an enamelist, and I was doing a lot of CAD work, in Rhino specifically, because I was trained in that. So I would model the rings in Rhino here. We would print them in-house on a Solus sintering printer and resin printer. And then we would get them cast out of house across the street. And then I would take them back and clean them up and enamel them. So image of the process, it was really valuable to see how like production worked. This was my first like journey into production jewelry at all, but especially it was nice to see how it worked in other countries and other parts of the world, what's similar, what's different, and how to kind of integrate that into your own making practice. So I was there about 6 months, and it's like very different for like being a bench jeweler than coming out of a place like this where I had complete total freedom in the studio. I can make whatever I want. And here I was, modeling and cleaning screws for 6 hours a day or so. But here's what they look like after they are enameled. So I'm not wearing it, but I have one in the studio. If you want to come by and take a look at one in real life, you can look at them. So they're vitreous enamel and gold for the most part. There's some silver ones, but that's what I was doing there. And here is a gecko that I saw in the Negev desert over there. Nice little guy. Here's very good camouflage. Like, oh boy. Gotta have my animal facts. After my time in Israel, I came back to the States and I did an 11-month residency at Pocosin Art School of Fine Craft in Columbia, North Carolina. So here's our building, nice rainbow, nice studio. So I was in a similar position there as I am here, studio tech slash like studio coordinator type thing, but I was just called a resident artist, but it was the same type of thing, maintaining the studio, working with instructors, and teaching. So, all right, Jimmy made fun of this before, but when people see this birch now, it seems like it's about COVID, but I made this in 2019. So it's got nothing to do with COVID. It was like a riff on how people think that bats are blind. But they actually have very good vision. And there was a sign in the like nature preserve there that like said that and was perpetuating the myth and said, oh, bats use echolocation because they have very bad eyesight, when bats use echolocation because it's better for finding bugs than eyesight. But they can see fine. So get that out of your heads. They can see you. They just don't have to. They're better than us. So this is a cloisonne brooch I made at Pocosin in the studio there. This is a dragonfly, also a cloisonne pendant that I made for the old wood assistant when I was an assistant here, as a trade that we did. So I was sticking with a lot of the same kind of work, really honing my enameling skills, figuring out what I like to do, the techniques I like to do, and why I like to do them. So I was kind of on the verge between something like this that isn't necessarily production jewelry that you'd see in a studio, but isn't really like conceptual either. And this kind of thing, which I consider to be my, like my actual work. So I developed this kind of Greek vessel style of enamel when I was there, where I take bits of copper flake oxidation and lay it into clear enamel before I do the actual firing. So it kind of creates that very Greek vessel look, very graphic and very deliberate lines. So I was doing a lot of that there. I was also just having fun playing around in the studio. So here's this cheese box. It opens up. That's in the studio. You can come take a look. I'm going to start to go through the slides a little bit faster. So I also developed this dot technique that I do there for my students in the intro class this week. When you make a center punch mark that we do for drilling the holes, all of these dots are center punch marks. So I'm just sitting there center punching away for hours and hours and hours. These are also in the studio if you want to come take a look. But I was making a lot of brooches back then because I have been fed the idea that contemporary jewelers had to make brooches. We had to do it. So I was doing that, and there's nothing wrong with brooches. I like brooches. Who doesn't love a good brooch? But there are other things out there to make. But I do like the pieces that I made during this time. So here's my little window brooch. That's up in there in the studio too, if you want to come take a peek. But I made a bunch of these belt buckles, more brooches. I stopped making this work mostly because it hurt my body. It hurt my hands a lot, it hurt my wrists, it hurt my fingers, it messed my tendons up a little bit. There's ways I probably could have done it to make it a little bit better, but as I was doing it, it wasn't really sustainable for me. So I kind of don't do these as much anymore, but I do smaller pieces still that have them in it. Some cufflinks. I'm gonna go a little faster. We're already at 8 minutes. Can you believe that? So here's some little, I had laser cutter access there. I had access to a laser cutter, oh my gosh, what was the name? A Trotec 100 speedy laser. It was great. And I had it in the building that I lived in. So in the middle of the night, if I was bored, I can go down and play around with the laser cutter. So I got really proficient at that tool. So I'm really grateful to have had that here. So here's some little anglerfish brooches that I made. I did some commissions while I was there for this Norwegian artist. I made a bunch of these. They're little porcelain slip cast reindeer heads that I put on all these metal bits. So that was really fun. And a nature pick. We had beautiful sunsets there as evidenced. Here's some animals. Here's a little lizard. It's an anole. Here's a tiny little slider turtle. And here is a garden weaver spider. Note the interesting webbing over here. Very fun. After that, I went to Rhode Island School of Design for my master's in Providence, Rhode Island. I was still not quite abandoned the dot technique then. I had a lot of frustrations and kind of contentions with academia there, not with the school in general, but just how I perceived like to be pressured into making and how we are expected to be working in the studio as students, specifically in academia, like in universities. So I made a lot of work that was kind of referencing that. So here's a piece that took a really lot of time to make, a lot of different techniques, difficult techniques, but says lazy bones. And oops, doesn't let me go forward anymore. Rachel. Oh, I fixed it. Sorry. Everything's fine. The picture's blurry on purpose. And so when worn, it kind of raises the question, like, why is someone wearing something that says lazy bones? Why are you calling yourself lazy? Are you calling somebody else lazy? But when you look at the piece, it clearly wasn't made through sloth. I made a few of these. Your guess is as good as mine. I didn't really know what I was doing, or I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. And I had a lot of imposter syndrome and did a lot of work towards imposter syndrome and research about it. And it's like absolutely fascinating to read about that. And everybody has imposter syndrome. So I made some pieces about that. Not everything's made out of metal. I have a little pull for art brooch. That's what you get when you pull it out, and then it winds back up and it like shoots back into the thing. So that's really fun. That was one of my favorite pieces in grad school, and then COVID hit and I didn't make anything for a year and a half, so didn't finish that direction. But when COVID ended and I got back into the studio, I made my thesis body of work for grad school, which is a completely different direction, has to deal with modern interpretations of biblical Judaism. Fun. It is very fun, but it's a mouthful. And so if you know a little bit about modern Judaism, you cannot, Orthodox Jews, you can't carry anything around on Shabbat, which is from Friday night to Saturday night. You can't pick up a stick, you can't carry your book, your handbag, you can't even carry a child. And so there are like loopholes and substitutions to get around that kind of thing to make modern life easier and more convenient. So Orthodox Jewish communities will put something up around their town called an erev, which is a thin stretch of fishing line. And that changes the area from private or public domain to private domain. And you can carry something like in your house around. So now the whole neighborhood is private domain and you can carry something. So I'm actually talking about this piece right now. So I made a little one that has a little string that goes around your hand. And so your hand can carry anything at once, but the rest of your body cannot. So that's a little erev. The coat thing is kind of similar. If you need a chair somewhere, you can wear whatever you want because that's clothing and that's necessary for survival. But you can't carry a chair. But if the chair is part of your clothing and you can't separate it from a jacket, which you might need for protection from the elements, you can carry it. So I combine a chair and a coat. Then when you're done, you just take it off and it looks like the coat is draped over a chair. And there it is hanging up on the wall with the other black coats. So fun. And we looked at that one already. No, I'll stop over time. I made some mezuzahs, which are a Jewish protection object for the door on the house. So I made these for the body, kind of referencing how the body is a home for the soul, but we don't have any kind of protection over it. And I was also referencing people who don't have a permanent physical home, who might need something and aren't granted like the mitzvah or the blessing of having mezuzah on their homes. I made one for the body. So these are fun. I made a whole series of those, there's like 10 of them. And then I came back to Peters Valley and I've done a lot of work in the studio, me and my assistant last year, my assistant this year, thanks Megan. So we transformed this area to these stake walls. So we dragged all our stakes out of storage and cleaned them up and put them on the wall. And we redid the floors in the studio. So if you've never been in them before, they're clean now, it's great. And I keep making my Greek vessel enamel style, which is my favorite thing to make right now. This is in possession and on loan from Bad Doggy Sean Fitzsimmons. It's in the gallery, go take a look. And that's my little house here. And that is my spiel. I'm 4 minutes over, which is, it's I've seen worse. But thank you, Peters Valley, for having me. And thanks all for listening. That's it.
Thank you, Talya. Thank you, Megan. So up next on our presenter list is Zachary Lihatsch. Great, being presented by Sean Fitzsimmons in blacksmithing. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm here. I'm Sean Fitzsimmons. I'm the blacksmithing assistant here to introduce Zachary Lihatsch. He's originally from the New Hampshire, Vermont area. He's been blacksmithing for about 17 years now. He got his start in Tucson taking a blacksmithing class at a community college, which he later came back to teach full circle. He got his master's at the Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. He's the owner and proprietor of Dry River Forge. He specializes in public art and a lot of gallery work. He's taught at Penland, SIU, and across Europe. He owns over 50 chickens and fruit trees, and he's here teaching a kitchen utensil class. People of Peters Valley, I give you Zachary the Legend Lihatsch. Here we go.
Oh, such a good intro. So I guess before I really start anything, there's I guess there's one consistent red line. I've done a lot of work and gone in a lot of different directions with the work that I've done. But the kind of consistent prevalent theme is this idea of tension or edge and border. If you think about the fact that when you look, okay, oh, I see. If you look at a horizon, you look at a mountain range and see the sky defining that mountain range and the mountain range defining that sky. I'm interested in the space between those two things. Kind of in ecology, it's referred to as an ecotone. I'm interested in how borders and boundaries, both political, physical, exist in the world, geopolitical, interpersonal, in the art world, how things of value are determined from things of non-value, and particularly how we can look at spaces of division and use art to look at those spaces and subvert them into spaces of connection. So this is part of a series that I did where I was looking at this, trying to figure out what endemic and contemporary influences could be to kind of create what would contemporary blacksmithing be if we created it today? What are the things that are endemic to where we live? What are the things that have existed within our lifetime that can be applied to something that has existed far beyond, far before we were all here? And so I started thinking about graffiti as an art form that's kind of a folk art that I think is specific to the US. And in many ways, I feel by subverting the walls in a city and taking over those spaces, that is a way that people are subverting spaces to create environments of connection. So I started playing with this idea of trying to make these lines three-dimensional, and I started first with this idea of trying to make it gestural in a way that looked like writing, but was divorced from the word itself, but still recognized as the art form. That makes sense. So kind of playing with the concept of a sign and semiotics, and then doing quasi-representational stuff. I was aiming for a heart, a human heart. Then starting to look at how they might be on the body. And then eventually that turned into making large scale architectural features. What would a gate look like if it was turned into these same line qualities in a more intentional way? So this was a gallery show that I did in Carbondale. And then also thinking about the idea of border and, contemporary art and art in general. Like we look at art on a wall, it always has a border. It defines an area of value versus an area of non-value. What happens when we start to play with that? And what happens when we start to like subvert those boundaries? So I moved past that into looking at cartography and like geopolitical boundaries. I live in Tucson, Arizona, which is it's a crazy intersection of stolen land, borders that people die trying to cross every day. And these are cubic zirconia that are set in a piece of steel, and each one of those represents a corpse that was found in 2018 of people trying to come to this country. This is another map of the different sizes of poles represent different groups of Syrian refugees attempting to cross the Adriatic. And then finally I did this, that was a map of the US of the counties. And when I showed these, each of them had like a little QR code that you could scan that would lead you to a link of web information for different organizations. This one was dealing more with like privatization of prisons. After grad school, I was lucky enough to be a resident at the Estonian Academy of Art, where I did like a small series of sculptures that were based on the kind of crumbling Soviet architecture of that area. The one thing that's really nice about Estonia, and particularly the city of Tallinn, if anyone ever wants to go there, it's a beautiful place filled with really kind people. And the pendulum has swung like very far in the other direction after like post-communist regime, and people are really embracing the arts there, and there's a lot of support and community around that. But a lot of the infrastructure that's there is really kind of like steered around and like not looked at by the older generations just because it represents so much hurt. And the younger generations have really adopted a lot of these spaces, have turned a lot of them into community gardens and art spaces in the city. So I did this like short series of like planters and things dealing with like plants as kind of a representation of renewal for these spaces. Also like tea is a really like large part of culture there. And so I did this like tea set that's also like a watering can with sunflowers. And there are these, one thing I loved about Estonia, I love like old crusty industrial architecture. I always have, like crawling around abandoned buildings and things like that, but there are tons of these smokestacks all over Estonia. So I used some baby's breath in those to kind of like reference smoke. And then moving on, this is kind of where I'm at now. And like the series, I'm actually technically playing hooky by being here. I'm at a residency in Vermont right now. I'm supposed to be at a residency in Vermont right now. And I'm continuing this series that I'm doing, which I'm just calling like the Bound series, I guess. And a lot of these, I guess for me, this idea that, I don't know, we live a life on a planet that we're like holistically like in conflict with every day, every time we drive our car, and like trying to like wake up in that world and like recognize that we're in conflict, but like not so much that we don't want to be alive anymore. Like we have to wake up, we have to survive, we have to keep going. So trying to make these shapes that like are very much about conflict and about I don't know, being at odds, but at the same time trying to find a form of like calm among that. So there's like ideas behind like that, like dealing with like bonsai, dealing with like BDSM, dealing with industry, deforestation, agriculture. This is actually kind of a predecessor to all those that I did in Sweden a long time ago. And then finally, I just figured I'd end with something. This is kind of the work that I've been doing lately in Tucson. My shopmate and I did this together. We have like a bike path that goes around the entire city. And that kind of box you can see to the right there is a barometer that it takes census information. It can tell if you're on horseback, if you're walking, if you're biking, and it updates a computer database. And that information is used to like justify building more bike paths, which is always a good thing. And that's another shot of that at night. That was like probably the largest scale project I've ever done, but yeah, I guess that's all there is. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Zachary. Thank you, Sean. Up next on our presentation list tonight is Czashka Ross, introduced by Lindsay Davis. And this is for printmaking. So welcome.
Hello, everybody. Czashka Ross is a Canadian multidisciplinary artist currently teaching calligraph and various monoprinting techniques on and off the press. She has lived and worked in Manhattan since 1978, part-time visiting this area since mid-80s, becoming familiar with Peters Valley, and has worked here frequently ever since. Czashka divides her time between summers in Dingman's Ferry and winters in Panama. Please welcome Czashka.
Thank you, everybody. I'm really happy to be here at Peters Valley teaching and sharing my work with you tonight. I grew up in Canada, as Lindsay said, Southern Ontario, on a farm, and they have fabulous fences there with, I think I'm on the wrong, yeah, split rail cedar with these tripods in the middle joining them, and fences have entered into my work for ages. So I love keeping whimsical things. That's traveled around with me for, I hate to say it, 45 years now. This is an interior fence. So instead of being on the outside of the space it's occupying, it's on the inside, and it's marigolds woven in and creating an indicator, a marker, a definition. And the marigolds have a good amount of competition with the brick wall. And when it's taken out of context, it becomes a marker, a forest, and other innuendos as you place it in different spots. This is a two-dimensional drawing in the ground, and those are concrete fence posts. I love light. This is a suite of 10 different images called Beyond Fences with different types of printmaking techniques, 20 editions of 20. And this is prepping for installation of a 110-foot fence, concrete, in Pontiac, Michigan, north of Detroit. And it was really exciting to do this. And I cast all the fence posts, different elevations, because it was on a slope. And it lined up with a school fence in the back, you can see on the left hand, which extends the fence even further. But as I kept photographing it, I loved the shadows and the holes that the posts were put into. So I switched to focus on the shadows and smaller details. So these are coil porcelain pieces. And this is a pair of trapezoids, one over top of the other, pushed out from the bottom so that it makes a 12 by 12 inch square. And then it fit in with a series of pieces that had other different kinds of angulations that compromised them. I took a year off and had an NEA grant to apprentice at a hand paper making mill in Indiana. And the shadows are on the left and the paper's on the right. And this is the culmination of my graduate thesis show with the blue lines going straight through when you see the structure of the piece with the joints made out of lithoplates. I was really excited to get that right. I had a postgraduate fellowship to study traditional Western style document handmade paper in Europe. And so this was made at the Richard de Bas mill in Ambert in France. And I worked a lot in Sweden and also Barcelona. Then I compressed the pieces. So instead of being three-dimensional, they were all flat. And I used a lot of patterning for structure and shape and volume. And then Japanese paper was embedded in these works. This is 90 inches by 40. So the base sheets of all of these are white cotton rag. And then there's an overlay of linen with everything else sandwiched in between, and then painting in between and on top. This is a permanent installation in San Rafael, California. And it was going to be about just north of there with Sonoma and Napa and everything with the grapes. And then the Gulf War was declared sort of 2 nights before my presentation was due. And it became, this part became a shield with piercings and sad oozings and other structural pieces, these throwing kind of knives. They're made with a batik technique using anodizing. And then I would keep putting it back in the bath and then block out different areas. I did that at Talek's Foundry. This is wood, like a stick structure with support hose and handmade paper on it, and covered with encaustic. Deconstructed screen prints. This is 4 by 8 feet. And a lot of these material things I learned here at Peters Valley over the years, or met people and we collaborated. These are from the Anagama kiln. That's a little pine tree incarcerated by paper, and an organza curtain. I like to work a lot from nature and do a lot of painting. And my main practice of clay monoprints is in Panama. And the colors are mixed with tile 6 china clay, which is dust and dusty, as you know. And I work on a clay slab, and the slab stays wet for the whole 6-month period. And it's within this frame, the gray frame, and all the drawing and painting goes on top of it. Then it's printed onto rime, which is a non-woven polyester substrate. And it's engineered for air conditioning filter, so it attracts the dust. And so it's an automatic bond with the colors. So if you try to print it on paper, it's a very pale, kind of insignificant, kind of luminous look, but you can't get this kind of punch. And I love the fluidity of it. This is Exodus from Cuba, 1980. So there was a period of 24 hours when Castro allowed people to leave freely, and he was really declaring to the world he wasn't so bad, but 20% of the people of 125,000 who tried to leave just perished overnight. And the second and the fourth print are shrimp boats, and the first, third, and fifth are the inclement weather that people encountered trying to leave. And even though it was only 90 miles, they couldn't make it. So kind of anger, sadness, and frustration. This is covered with it. It's during COVID, how crazy we've all felt and scared of contact and everything. This is on the high seas. This is called soundings in the maritime sense of knowing where we are and our position in things and what's around us. This is a group of sketches which predated the next group of drawings. So these are 90 inches by 24. This is Romulus and Remus, and they're all aqua media with fireplace charcoal. This is called Pushing a Wheel with a Stick. Peters Valley had a nuance show, and I was invited to present work for that. And it's my first DNA piece, and it's indigo dyed grass hearts with iris pods bound with copper, casting shadow. And you'll see this piece mimicked in the left-hand panel. So these are oil paintings 4 by 6 feet. I'm interested in DNA for many reasons, and it's been really important, all the scientific stuff with trying to figure out COVID stuff. A lot of the stem cell research moved to Panama, and they can't start new projects here. So that surprised me too. These are Maiolica ceramic pieces, continuing with the ovals and the curves. and the importance of patterning. This is a fire pit, fired piece, as well as this one, pit fired, not fire pit. And it's oil painted on the inside and watercolor on the outside with encaustic wax, sealing it all in. This is a piece that was being fabricated in a park in Boston to make movable structures. And it just kind of really excited me. And I started using all my cast-offs from clay and making darts and curves out of things, and did a series of habitat pieces. And I wish we could send everything we put into dumpsters to places where they need shelter, and we could do something better with it. I'm here teaching printing on and off the press, including collograph. So this is a 4-foot by 2-foot diptych. And I have a piece of this series in the gallery called Celebrate something trifecta. Celebrate. Crown trifecta, sorry. I'm very interested in language, and this is garlic scapes. And I do a lot of gardening, so I can get garlic scapes. And I'm really glad everybody could take the time to share my work. And I'm glad to be here at Peters Valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Czashka. Thank you, Lindsay. Up next on our list is Antra Sinha. I believe I'm saying your name correctly. Introduced by Logan Stallings. Thank you.
Okay, hi. I'm introducing Antra. Antra is a ceramic artist, educator, and installation artist. She received her BFA and MFA from the MS University of Baroda, yeah, in India. And she also has a second MFA from Utah State University. She was an apprentice to Ray Meeker and Deborah Smith at Golden Bridge Pottery starting in 2002, where she worked for a decade. And she has also traveled, worked, and learned in Japan, Australia, Germany, Denmark, and India. She currently lives with her husband in Logan, Utah, and serves as gallery coordinator and art instructor at Utah State University. Antra is so great. We've had her in the studio today. She's such a great presence. Help me welcome her.
Thank you, Logan. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Peters Valley. All of you are just absolutely amazing to make this happen. As you can tell, I have listed the places that I've lived, and I find it really fascinating that, I could just divvy up in percentage where all I've been to. But I also wanted to share that in the continent of India, I was born in the East and lived in the North and the West. In the East, we spoke Hindi. In the West, we spoke Gujarati. And in the South, where we speak Tamil. So I learned the different languages in India. And of course, then my travels to Japan and Germany, I was really interested in those languages. I actually landed up learning Japanese for an year, and that first year examination. When I meet a Japanese person, the words kind of come to me really fast. And then when I'm thinking about it, just like away from somebody who knows Japanese, and I just can't get those words. Anyways, but I've loved learning all the languages. And yeah, I mean, I think that what I want to mention is that with languages, it is about getting to know the different cultures, like, people who live there and what they eat, how they behave, what are the most important things for them. And I find so many commonalities and differences. So I'm excited about that. As a painting undergraduate student, I started putting cement and sand and clay on my paintings, and my teachers said that I should do mural design rather than continue as a painting postgraduate student. So that's what I did in murals. I tried working with clay, with fresco, sand casting, and terracotta, and thought that I wanted to learn how to make pots on the wheel to create forms that I would then make murals with. My life brought me to Pondicherry. Ray Meeker and Deborah Smith have this amazing place called Golden Ridge Pottery. And instead of just learning how to make pots and making murals after that, Ray's monumental scale of working with ceramics just took me over. I mean, I started making forms in three-dimensional manner rather than going back to murals. So I thought that I'll begin right at the beginning, where at 7-month wheel throwing course, we would mix our own clay, and you couldn't just go out and buy clay in India. I still don't know all the codes that you have in Laguna and stuff like that. We would mix our own clay, glazes, and there was no Saturday, Sundays. We would just be kicking the wheel every day, nearly 8 hours or sometimes more. And I would make simple functional forms, but also you can see a pair there using wheel for making forms that you don't technically think about as wheel thrown vessels. My first exhibition in 2005, I started creating these platters, decorative platters, where I threw 16 pounds of clay, literally made a slab, and after it was cut off the wheel, dried a little bit, the surface dried, and then I stretched it to create these surfaces. Stamping I did while the clay was still wet. And these two Japanese kanji characters, shiku, actually means antara in Hindi. It's a stanza of a song in Hindustani classical music. I believe most of us have existential questions, and trying to answer those questions, I was reading Zen when I came upon this ink drawing by Shengai's ink drawing of square, triangle, and circle. And I thought I would make it in 3 dimensions. And I started with making it in 1-inch size. And these, the image that you see, this is 5 inches. And then I made them in 14 inches size. And after that, I thought about, I really wanted to live my life with basic necessities. And so tetrahedron is a form with the least number of elements, and it's a stable form. Cube is 6 faces. I should say tetrahedron has 4 faces. Cube has 6 faces, and sphere has infinite. And I was just thinking, one thing that I want, the basic minimum, live like a monk. And the other that, growing up, I thought there was just black and white, or there was good faces or bad faces. And I didn't want to be bad faces, or then I recognize all the different faces that people have. Like, why does my dad say one thing in a certain way to me and one thing in a different way to my brother? Or why do people have different faces? And I was like, well, I don't think I can eliminate all the faces, but can I reduce the number of faces so that I just look like, something similar to everyone? Tetrahedron. Just took my fascination, 4 faces. What can I make with it? Which is not as stiff and straight like the edges of the tetrahedron. So I came up with this idea that if I pressed a ball of clay between my forefinger and thumb, it'll be four-faced, but I did not know what it would be. So the next day, this is what I did in my studio, and I came up with this seed for what can be many different forms. And I joined the two edges and created what I call, in its initial version, it was called tetrax because it looks like an axe, kind of a tool. But then I wanted it to be a little more gentle, so I call it tetrarch. And so the tetrarch I've made in various different sizes, and it has been fired in many different kilns. So that's 9 inches sitting on a coffee table, an 18-inch on a pedestal, and a 5-foot one, which is part of a pool deck area in a hotel in Chennai. I will switch to talk about kind of the types of firing that I do, because I think that it's important to notice that the work that I've done is all in a wood fuel kiln. And we fired, I learned pottery in Golden Ridge, where we fired kilns to content in a wood burning kiln. And this image is what we call monster anagama, because it's really huge anagama. In Japan, the anagamas are tiny little kilns that you kind of crawl into and stuff like that. Ray Meeker decided to make this anagama on a foundation of a climbing kiln and Naborigama, which we're going to be firing here at Peters Valley. But this kiln was, I would say, 3 times bigger than what we have here. And that climbing kiln had already been fired 100 times. So that was pulled down, and a single shape arch built to make it into an anagama. And I, fired in that with a group of potters from around the area. And these are the pots that I made there. And so you can see the fact, and I think my participants in my workshop will recognize the spontaneous slip brush marks that I use in my pottery. And my tetrarch form. And then in my residency at Japan, I recognized that I learn about my country much more when I'm away from it, or at least, the place where I'm born, because I'm a human. I live on the earth and not really, a person from India, so to say. My forms evolved in the sense that I looked back at the Indian civilization and found that image of a ritual object called Mother of Creativity, Aditi, and that's this form. And so then on, I started making forms that had these full volumed shapes and lids. And then I keep making forms inspired by nature, seeds, go back to tetrarch once in a while with hexagons, which is another really simple, basic form that fits in really well. Of course, beehives, but like other structural things are made out of hexagon, and incorporated that with my sculpture, and learned to use CAD and designed hexagons on SolidWorks, used CNC mill to carve plaster molds to slip cast these. Another iteration of my tetrarch, more of it, and the tetrarch form, creating different variations, and hexagons again in a Fibonacci series. So firing different parts of the wood kiln to get those different effects. And that's me from small little idea to the 5 feet size sculpture and hopefully bigger in future. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Antra, and thank you, Logan. For our final presentation tonight, we have Janine Wang in the Fiber Studio, introduced by Amelia Stern. Thank you.
Hello, I'm here to introduce Janine. She began making furniture while studying architecture at the Cooper Union and found herself much more drawn to building than the planning of building. She went on to pursue an MFA in furniture design from the Rhode Island School of Design and has since exhibited with the Center for Art and Wood, Aramont School of Arts and Crafts, Wharton Eschrick Museum, the American Association of Woodturners Gallery of Wood Art, Appalachian Center for Craft, AAW International Woodturning Symposium, Scoogle Center for Environmental Education, and the State Museum of Pennsylvania. Please join me in welcoming Janine Wang.
Thanks, Amelia. And thanks, Peters Valley. I'm very happy to be here. I have nothing but happy and fond memories of being here. But I have not seen this slideshow in a while. Not totally sure it's on it, but I know it's more than 10 minutes, so I'm just going to try to go as fast as I can. First slide is of Midtown Manhattan. I was born and raised in New York. I've experienced a certain kind of freedom. I've been commuting. As a young kid, I commuted from the age of like 11, about 3 hours a day until I graduated and went to, well, actually I didn't leave New York, but I have commuted a lot. And in New York, they give you a free Metro card with 3 rides on it as a middle or high schooler, one to get you to school and get you home, and one to do whatever you want with, which sounds insane. And I'm not saying it's right, but it's what happened. So I was able to like go places and do things with my friends. I was a nerdy art kid, so I would do things like go to the Met with my boyfriend for no reason, and just draw. And I learned a certain kind of like freedom in the environment that I did not previously understand. I thought that was the best thing in the world, and I loved built environments. I decided to do the thing. I went to architecture school, thinking that that would be the way that I would have the most like carefree, impactful life in the world. I hated it a lot. I found that there is a very vast gulf between designing and actually building the world that you wanted to live in. And so I got very depressed. I actually had to take a gap year in the middle of school where I tried a few different jobs, my favorite of which was working with this furniture designer, Takashi Miyakawa, in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, where for the first time I experienced what it was like to live and work in a wood shop. I'm like cooking dumplings in the middle of a wood shop for lunch. And he helped me build my very first woodworking project, which is this set of collapsible stairs for my very old dog who, she was over 100 pounds, had very bad arthritis. And arthritis is a downward spiral where if you don't exercise, it gets worse, and it's harder to exercise the worse it gets. So she was eventually unable to jump into our 2 cars. I made this set of adjustable stairs so that she could jump into the trunk and we could take her on hikes. Around this time, my parents bought this foreclosed home that was like kind of not in great shape in the Poconos. And for the first time, this like super city slicker Chinese immigrant family from New York, they were from Shanghai, so we were city all the way through, found ourselves in the woods, and we were like the only immigrant family in the middle of East Stroudsburg. Like, what is this world? I have to give my parents credit for being like the best teachers I've ever had. They led by example. They ended up really liking fixing houses, and I watched them take these like moldy, disgusting homes, rip out all the mold, take out the drywall. I watched my 2 skinny little parents put up an entire drywall ceiling for a first floor of a home by themselves, just the 2 of them as a team. And
that was when I realized there's a different kind of freedom in your environment that is a lot more direct, and that's what I wanted. So that combined with like figuring out like you can also live like this. I was like, architecture, I'm out of here. I went to furniture school. So at furniture design school, my teacher, Chris Rose, one like very early on, I think it was the first semester, our first lecture class, drew this like lowercase, really sharp H on the board. And he was like, what is this? And we were like, it's a chair. And he was like, why is it this shape? What about this like hard bunch of surfaces makes you think like, oh, that's for my body? When you look at the way a person is shaped, we are like, there's very little like like physical relation to the thing other than like we can sit on it. His argument, and I've come to believe is true, is that we were trained to use the furniture that exists around us. We were trained as like, say, a preschooler, you're told to sit still and not move. You learn to sit in a shape like this. And that is in very sharp contrast to wood turning. And I'm now realizing that this is a very wood turning centric presentation. I'm teaching a wood turning / basketry course, but my first love is definitely wood turning. I, in furniture school, discovered the lathe for the first time, which was like this very underused tool where we were at. We had these beautiful lathes that I now realize are like $15,000 lathes. We had 3 of them. People didn't know how to use them. We were using them as glue up surfaces. So I was like, what is this? And I got a short demo from our tech, James Rossner at RISD, who was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Nobody ever uses it. I can't really tell you any more than what I know. And like, there's not really anyone around. You can try like this one guy, Mark, who had made a couple of bowls on the lathe. And I was like, okay, then I'm going in blind. So I ended up making whatever with like no background knowledge and no understanding of like what the reputation of wood turning has in like the larger craft cultural world, which is fine with me. I made this very ugly chair that I don't share publicly except for here, but just to make a point, I made this stool of spinning nested spindles that when they are nested together, actually like they feel so good on your butt. You would never expect something that's made out of like hardwood, like it's hard maple and it's like round, but when you put them all together, you not only can like find just the right place for your sit bones to rest, but you also can like when you move while you're sitting, which you naturally do, you can just slide right across the surface. Every one of those spindles spins. And that was largely based around this this drawing series, which it got a little garbled in our file transfer compression process, but I made these over life scale sized drawings of people at work. So I'm noticing that people actually do move, and you can kind of see like the void in between where all of our limbs are is kind of where that furniture is. In wood turning, well, so when I made this stool, I realized how hard it is to try to make a piece of furniture that will like fill all of the space in there. And so I decided to start small and start reasonably. I started with the hand and I kind of never left. The first thing I noticed about wood turning was that when you turn something that's like hard and square and get it even slightly round, oh my God, it feels amazing to touch. I still like kept that first terrible wood turn piece, which I barely clipped the corners off of, but I got enough of a round on it to be like, so I ended up making this wood turn pattern, which is a pattern of beads that is fit to the dimensions of my hand. So I just measured out my hand and made all these spaces so that my hand fits perfectly into that bead. And I made a very simple table to try to frame that like functional ornamental detail. The table is also shaped at like kind of an ambiguous height, so it's not really even a table. It's also, you're also able to use it as a seat, and it's small enough that you can pick it up, no problem. I live with this in my home and I love this thing. I also made a series of wood-turned stools based around the one-legged milking stool. Really like the idea of furniture that you just like, you kind of don't know what to do with it because you don't like see it in the everyday world. I made a whole bunch of them with different heights, some of them with no leg even, some of them with two bodies, and just put them in the hands of like curious students, and they came up with all sorts of uses for them that like were amazing. An important detail of this was that they needed like certain small human in like design, we call them affordances. So it's like something like a button or like a handle that tells you like you can, this is kind of guides you a little bit to suggest how it's supposed to be used. So just a little bit of those. This is kind of not wood turning at all, but it is round. It is an upholstered piece that I was trying to make something that you could, like a piece of furniture that could just mold into whatever shape you wanted. It was based on the idea that like a comforter is the perfect piece of furniture in the landscape of the bed. So you could kind of like smush it or like throw into a corner, or like it could become a table you put your laptop on. It had a whole bunch of like ropes in it that you could like wrangle and turn into different shapes for different needs. I had an upholstery phase, I'm going to admit. These are the snug stones. They're based on the idea of like finding your perfect spot in a landscape. They're fully upholstered with felted wool, and inside this like homogeneous woolly landscape is a whole bunch of surprise seating textures. So in the small little egg-shaped stone is one of those like posture air pillow things. And in the larger one, I have like, it's upholstered with like garden gate springs and latex. So when you sit on it, there's like this really nice smushy feeling. And like the top surface is hard, so you could use it for like mugs as a table. This was a shelf for those personal objects that we carry around in our lives, but kind of end up shoved in the back of a kitchen cabinet or a junk drawer. I have really bad memory, so I actually use objects to try to like map out my life a lot of the time. And I don't want to put them on display per se. So each one of these little upholstered pieces was specific to every piece that I intended to put inside them. And then they didn't have to be visible to other people, but I knew it was in there. This is a series of wood-turned vessels that are all based on hand gestures. And I too, like Zach, am playing hooky from a residency right now, where so I made these in 2018, but I wasn't that like I'm still not a very fast wood turner, and each one of these pieces took so long to make that like I'd have to sell them for hundreds of dollars, and the idea was that you would use them in everyday life. So the idea was that like I really like the idea of the handle of something being like the hand of something. So when you like pick up a mug or like a teapot, it's saying like, hi, hello, please hold me this way. Or if you open the door to a building, it's like saying hello to the space inside. And I wanted to like express something of what I found so beautiful about wood turning and its connection to the world, and give like a little bit more sensitivity to the designed objects in our lives. So my residency right now is to try to turn these from fine art into slip cast ceramic pieces, and that's going pretty well. This is a series based around the emerald ash borer, which some of you may have heard of by now. It's this horrible beetle from China. It's an invasive beetle that just can't be stopped, and it's taking down every single one of our ash trees, and ash trees are going to go effectively extinct within the next 10 or 20 years. It's pretty bad. There's nothing we can really do to stop it that isn't so expensive that it's prohibitive. So what people are actually doing is they're cutting down ash trees just to try to slow the spread across the states until we can find a solution. This series is called Holding on the Aftermath. I used a whole bunch of pieces of like a sick tree that was manifesting its sickness in certain tree ways, and then crossed those with like the affordances for the human hand to try to create a connection between species, and then again, something that you can live within your home so that the tree lives on. Gonna skip through a lot of stuff now. This is another, it's a nightstand for everything you don't want anyone to see. It was kind of technically difficult to make. It's a split turn steam bent wood turning. For the handle, I made it in conjunction with my partner, who's a really good steam bender, and that's Brian, and that is our cat Nori. We've done a good amount of work together. Steam bending goes very well with basketry. There is some more. This is actually the first, I think this is the first wood turning basketry crossover piece I ever did. I made it at an Aeromont residency, and when I brought it home, Brian was like, "What are those hoops? They're so boring and they're so round, circles suck." And so he made all these organic steam bent frames for us to try to work around. There's another one. This is a more recent piece. It was a split turned giant frame. It was for a Mexican ofrenda, or an altar to the Twin Towers for the 20th anniversary last fall. That I did with my artist friend Diego Salazar. And then this is what furniture I've made. A good amount of furniture. And this is what more along the lines of what I'm teaching right now. I crossed basketry and wood turning a while back, and I started sharing and like teaching more because I just want to share the knowledge. I also felt like I'm very overwhelmed by the basketry wood turning combination because there's so many possibilities and I don't have enough time to do them all. So I wrote an article and did a video for the AAW American Woodturner Journal, and it's been really lovely. People email me like pit photos of what they've been doing, and I've got like really nice responses. I also I just started like, what I mean to say is like I started dipping my toe into teaching, and that's been very, very gratifying. This was a article about a woodworking wood turning class that I did with Suzanne Kahn of Dovetail Wood Arts, where we taught our first ever classes with a full class of local teenage girls. 10 weeks, we taught them how to woodwork and wood turn. I also have been making hundreds of these basket weaving kits where you have a video and you can like learn to basket weave at home. And now I teach a good amount. This is my current job at Tiny WPA in Philadelphia. It's a nonprofit where we work on community skills building. I'm their building hero educator, where I work with a small group of local people who really want to learn to build, but like can't otherwise find a free program to learn how to do so. It's really cool. Actually, this morning I found out we were on WHYY for a playground, a pop-up playground that we are building in FDR Park right now. I'm very excited to work with them. That is it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you everyone for presenting tonight, and thank you studio assistants for introducing this week's instructors. This concludes the presentations for tonight. If you need anything, you'll be able to find it at the front office. Please enjoy your stay, and I wish you a wonderful week of workshops.
Hello, and thank you so much for watching this program. Peters Valley would like to thank its sponsors for making programs like this possible. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Peters Valley's channel to receive more like it in the future.